My great-grandfather was a construction foreman throughout the 50s and he worked on quite a few projects over the years. But the one I always heard stories was about when he worked on a building Disneyland. I guess he was a part of one of those companies that Disney constructed to build his park. When I first heard about that, I thought he was learning about secrets behind the rides and how the park functions. And while there was a little bit of that, most of his stories were different. I've never heard of this firsthand because my great grandfather died when I was young. But from the way my grandfather told me from his stories, it seemed that there was a lot of weird, seemingly unexplained stuff going on there. The first thing that the construction crews had to do was dig. This seemed normal, of course, as they had to fill foundations of various structures, but Grandpa said they also dug tunnels. These tunnels they dug on were for miles and seemingly had no purpose. You see, everything they dug out or built was supposed to be the part of the official blueprint, but not a single one of these underground chambers was shown. They installed gas lines, power, water, oxygen systems. It seemed like they were building a bunker. Walt would never say that the tunnels were for, but it sounded like Great Grandpa was convinced it wasn't the beginning. Bengen. There was other strange occurrences too while digging out those tunnels. One day he was called down as they were digging to check out something strange the workers had found. When he got down there, he found a door embedded directly in the earth. It looked just like any wooden door you'd see of a house. The door was clean and new looking. He thought that surely someone was playing a prank, but he noticed something strange. It seemed that the door was fused to the ground, as if the dirt itself was a part of the door. It was made difficult to remove, but they eventually did remove it and kept digging, thinking that it was a one-time thing, but they found more. Doors just started popping up. Seemed that almost every day they found a new one buried on the earth. But it was as if someone had cut the door and frame out of a house and just buried it here. Only he said they were always brand new, with not a speck of dirt or scratch on them. He said that he even got to the point when the workers were reporting doors appearing around the surface level of the park, as in they would find doors standing all alone in the middle of nowhere. They always appeared in the middle of the night and seemingly disappeared wherever someone left line of sight more than a moment. It was as if they were materializing out of thin air, only to vanish back into the void. It wasn't even so far that one worker claimed to have found himself trapped in the circle of a door that appeared before his eyes. He said the doors were locked and he couldn't escape. They found this worker curled up on the ground near Tomorrowland at around 3 a.m. one night. After telling his story that night, he was never seen again, but it was just assumed that he had quit. That wasn't the only weird thing, either. One night, Great Grandpa was sitting in his office, working at something, when he heard a knock at his door. At this point in time, they had finished below ground construction and had been working on buildings. He was often pulled away from his paperwork to go look something by the workers, so he expected something like this to even though it was nearly midnight. He didn't expect to see no one standing at his door. When he opened it, he was starting to get pissed off at some random disturbance when he spotted something in the distance. Someone wearing a Mickey Mouse costume was standing in the dark about 40 feet away from him. He thought it was some sort of stupid prank, but he noticed something very strange about the situation. The mouse costume looked off. It was like there for a little mistakes in it. The eyes were off centered, The colors were just slightly in the wrong shade. The material looked cheap and old. He yelled at the person, angered by the random prank, but the person in the costume didn't respond. They just stood there, twitching, shaking, and slightly in darkness. Great Grandpa just stared at him for a long time, frightened he would eventually look away for a moment, about to get help, only to see what he looked at back at the person that was gone. After that, the workers started reporting costume figures sighted in the night, never actually doing anything, only standing there. Whenever someone tried to get them help, the figure would disappear and not be seen again. They became so frequent that there was at least 3 to 5 reports a week. Most of the time, nothing ever came out of the figures, but there was one case where the worker actually had a close encounter with one of the figures. They had been carting a wheelbarrow of bricks over to one of the sites when they saw one of the costume figures in the distance. This worker was startled by the sight and tried to get away from the creature. They said that every time the costume figure was out of sight, they would hear creaking noises all around him. Then, whenever they went around the corner, the costume figure would be standing a bit close to them. Eventually, after rounding another corner, they came face to face with the thing, and their description of it was terrible. They said it smelled like decay. It twitched, and its breath was a low, rattling sound. They said the costume was clean. It looked wrong like the others, but up close he could tell that the suit was brand new. The creature just stared at them for a long moment, shaking and twisting in place. The worker tried to back up and run away, but that was a mistake. The creature lunged at him, leaving a huge scratch across the worker's arm. The worker blacked out after that, and they were found on the opposite side of the park from where they allegedly had fainted. Great Grandpa decided to ask Disney himself if they hired any cast members yet, or if they knew there were any suits brought into the park yet. Disney said that they hadn't even begun hiring costume wearers yet. No suits were even constructed at that point in time. Surprisingly, after the brief conversation, the suit creatures disappeared, never to be spotted again. However, things started to get more serious around the site after that. The previous stories could possibly be chalked up to hooligans messing around and pulling elaborate pranks, but this was something truly awful. A group of workers had been walking past the newly constructed Sleeping Beauty castle when a woman fell to her death, seemingly materializing out of nowhere and falling from the sky. One worker said that they were just walking along and didn't hear a scream or anything, only the hard splat of her hitting the pavement. They said she was dressed up like a Disney princess with all the hair done up and everything. Of course, they all ran to get help immediately. But upon returning to the spot, the body was just gone. She had clearly been dead upon the impact, but the body was nowhere to be seen. All that left was a small pool of blood and some red tissue that it was identified as human brain matter. Nobody has ever seen the woman before. Nobody ever saw her after that fall. The police were going to be involved, but the Disney officials stopped it before that got that far. A lot of workers started quitting. In between the random doors, the strange figures, and random dead people, I wouldn't blame them. This sounded like some sort of living nightmare. New people were hired, everything was swept under the rug. Walt was made sure nobody went to the media, and my great-grandpa stood by during it all. Watching in horror, he would have done something, but he needed the money and this job. And those days were something you just didn't talk about in public. The final incident inside the park took place a while after, where on the day before opening they were pouring the last of the asphalt. Great-grandpa had been working upon the newly poured surface when he spotted a boot upside down sticking out of nowhere, sticking out of the middle of the pavement. Thinking somebody just lost a shoe, his plan was to remove the boot and smooth the asphalt back over. However, he was very surprised to see that when he removed the boot, he found a human foot sticking out of the asphalt. This foot was attached to a leg, which clearly had been attached to the whole body. Naturally, they decided to break the ground and remove the body. They couldn't just leave a whole fucking person buried in Disneyland after that. It took a while, but it eventually removed the corpse, which was perfectly preserved. They attempted to identify him, but he had no wallet, and nobody knew who he was. He wore the standard construction worker outfit, but not a single person recognized him. They even handed over photos to police and let them start an investigation, but nothing turned up. The second question then pertained to who laid the asphalt and buried the man. It seemed that nobody knew who poured the material, and Grandpa couldn't figure it out either. The asphalt has been just poured when he walked by. Yet no workers were around, which was a fact that he didn't consider it until later. It seemed that nobody remembered how or when the section of the pavement was poured, as if it just appeared out of nowhere. All of this was horrifying. It creeped me out, and all these stories made me never want to visit Disneyland again. But the story that truly unsettled me was his final one. It was the day after the park opened. The last day on the job was for my great-grandfather. And he was going to talk to Walt Disney the one last time. It was only to discuss something banal like confirming the end of the contract or something. But great-grandpa was always excited to talk to Disney because he was Disney, after all. And even if some crazy shit went down his park, it was cool to be talking to someone famous and influential like him. So Disney's secretary lets him into his office, and the first thing great-grandpa sees freaks them the hell out. Walt is talking to the wall. He wasn't on the phone. There was nobody else in the room. He was standing with his back to the door, having a full conversation about the situation within the park, talking about how everything was going great. It wasn't as if he was talking to himself. It was like he was talking to an invisible person, as in Disney even waited to response and said, uh-huh, and stuff like that. He kept saying it's all being handled, nobody knows the truth. The workers don't understand, as if he was trying to convince someone to his point. After a few seconds of standing there, frozen, great-grandpa noticed something even more chilling. The wall that Walt was talking normally was supposed to be a tan in color, but the wall he was facing was slowly darkening to black. The craziest thing of all, there was an outline of the face in the beginning of the form of the wall, right above Walt's head. Against all forms of logic and reason, the materializing face winked at my great-grandfather. He knew something was wrong, so he got the fuck out of there and after that. Not knowing what the hell was going on, but not wanting to be involved, he didn't think Walt was even heard him or can come in or leave. That's how absorbed by the situation was. That was the last time he ever worked for Disney or visited Disneyland, and he urged us kids strongly not to go. But of course, being kids, we did anyway. Now, for all I know, my great-grandpa could have been off his rocker. Maybe he was just made this all up in an elaborate way to scare my grandfather. But about a month ago, I was going through some old stuff in the attic when I found a photo. And the photo was my great-grandfather, along with the dozens of construction workers all smiling at the camera. This picture was nice, with Sleeping Beauty's castles in the back, and even featuring Walt Disney standing in front of the workers. However, in the top part of the photo, out of focus, was a body hanging out of the person was a body hanging out of one of the castle's windows. It definitely wasn't a living person. They hung limp and lifeless. This photo was taken in the 50s, so I knew what Photoshop wasn't involved. That was the first time I truly believed all of the stories. That's what drove me to write this post. I knew must be more to the story. I feel like now I have to figure it out. I know of at least one or two construction workers from that site that might be still alive, and I just might be able to get a story or two out of them if I can track them down. If not, hopefully I can find their relatives or something. Either way, I feel just more I hear about the goings on at Disney, the more I want to know the truth. Perhaps I can find it.